right. Hello. Good morning. My name is Rachel Milio. I'm the TALOS PhD candidate for RT1 Semantic Annotation of Text. And my presentation today is entitled Phano and Strybele, Uncertainty, Disambiguation, and Mistaken Identity in a Semantic Prosopography of Attic Oratory. Okay, so this presentation exists within the broader context of my PhD thesis, which is Semantic Annotation and Attic Oratory. And this thesis investigates the application of semantic web methods to the corpus of Attic Oratory, structuring it as a knowledge graph, which includes a semantic prosopography of the corpus. And an additional hope of this project is to enhance the visibility of women within this corpus. So for this presentation, I'd first like to briefly define a few key terms in kind of unspecialized language. So semantic annotation is to provide machine-readable information about segments of data in order to enrich understanding for humans and machines. And prosopography is a collective biography of individuals within spatial and temporal constraints. So one of the outputs of this project is a semantic prosopography, which links in-text person references with individuals in the Attic law ontology. And how do we do this? So first, the corpus text is structured and marked up through very, very simple XML. The tags, such as person name, which you can see here, are automatically generated through an annotation transfer named entity recognition process. And then through a semi-automatic human-in-the-loop pipeline, these in-text annotations are confirmed and disambiguated, and then web annotations are generated, which use XPath selectors to link between XML markup and individuals in the ontology. An ontology entry looks a little bit like this. So it contains information such as gender, legal roles, and external identifiers, in this case, a reference to the persons of ancient Athens prosopography. All of this information is then synthesized on the Attic Oratory database webpage, which is a work in progress, which also presents text snippets containing references to the person from the corpus. However, this model is not without challenges. These challenges boil down to uncertainty, which is latent in humanities data, the unreliability of oratory as a biased and argumentative source, and the requirements of digital data structures, which tend towards fixedness rather than flexibility. And we can demonstrate some of these challenges through a case study using Demosthenes 59. So Pseudo-Demosthenes 59 is a forensic accusatory speech written for a xenias graphi, or an indictment for false citizenship, brought by Theomnestus and his father-in-law Apollodorus against a woman named Neaera. The charge is based on strict Athenian citizenship laws, which forbid marriage between citizens and non-citizens. In order to attack his political enemy, Stephanus, Apollodorus claims that Neaera, the woman who Stephanus lives with, is a foreign-born hetaira who Stephanus has married. However, cohabitating with a non-citizen mistress is completely legal, and we actually have many instances where this occurs elsewhere in the oratory corpus. Therefore, Apollodorus must prove that Neaera lives with Stephanus in the role of a wife. In order to prove this, Apollodorus introduces the character of Phano, who is, he claims, the daughter of this woman Neaera, who she brought with her to this place as a small child, who they then called Strybele, but now call Phano. She was given in marriage by Stephanus as his own daughter to an Athenian man. So, according to Apollodorus, to sum up, Neaera has a daughter from before coming to Athens to live with Stephanus. This daughter was once called Strybele and is now called Phano. However, Stephanus is pretending that this woman is his legitimate citizen daughter and marrying her to Athenian men. So, What is the potential defense here? We don't have the other side of this court speech, we rarely do, but we have what Apollodorus speculates his opponent's defense will be. I hear that he intends to make a defense like this. He's keeping her not as a wife, but as a hetaira, and that the children are not hers, but were born to him by another citizen woman, who he will claim was his relative that he married at an earlier date. So in this defense, Phano is a daughter from a previous marriage with a citizen woman. She's not associated with Neaera, and Neaera is not a wife, but a mistress. So what's happening here? The distinction between the argument that So the distinction between the argument that Phano is the daughter of Neaera or Phano is the daughter of a citizen is pretty clear-cut, but the details of the two names is a little harder to parse. So there are arguments that Phano is an inappropriate name for a citizen woman due to connotations of visibility. There are suggestions that Strybele is a servile name, and there are other theories that having nicknames in general is a trait of prostitutes. However, an especially interesting theory to me is the one posited by David Noy in 2009. So Noy argues that rather than a name change, the two names represent a change of identity. Strybele, the daughter of Neaera, and Phano, the daughter of Stephanus, and an Athenian citizen woman. In a society where respectable women were not named in public, the public awareness of a daughter would begin at the 10th day naming ceremony. Therefore, it's plausible that public awareness would be that Stephanus has a daughter named Phano. There is a woman who is referred to as the daughter of Stephanus. Therefore, they must be the same. Noy claims, therefore, that Phano, the legitimate daughter of Stephanus, died young, and her identity was then assumed by Neaera's similarly aged daughter, Strybele. So what do we do with all of this? There are multiple interpretations of the identity of Phano, which becomes very complicated to semantically annotate and model. If we have a passage such as this one, which is just saying Phano, who was once called Strybele, should Phano and Strybele point to the same entity? And what should this entity look like? Should it be connected to Stephanus or Neaera? My model uses properties such as parent of and child of to connect between people. Should there be properties to represent potential parenthood, something that does occur frequently in inheritance disputes centering around legitimacy? It's also important to point out here that the Persons of Ancient Athens prosopography, which is one of the most robust and authoritative prosopographies for classical Athens, has two separate entries for Phano and Strybele. So it treats them as separate people with separate identifiers. But then you could see most of the excerpts and the quotes and the information are identical. Yeah, so it's a little strange. So one potential approach to this is the factoid prosopography developed by John Bradley. So a factoid is a spot in a primary source where something is said about one or more persons. The model is designed to address situations where not every statement can be considered a fact, and it records when sources contradict each other. If we were to model this situation with factoid prosopography, or an abridged version of factoid prosopography, it would look a little like this. So we'd have statements such as Phano was once called Strybele as a factoid. It would reference person Phano, and it would be sourced from that passage in Demosthenes 59. And similarly, Phano was the daughter of Neaera would be a factoid from that same passage. This case study is indicative of a broader issue in the corpus in general. So the contrasting interpretations are an extreme instance of what we can see appearing very frequently. Our only insight into the majority of people within the corpus of Attic oratory comes from these heavily biased sources of court speeches, which are argumentative and one-sided. When people are discussed, they're being discussed to bolster an argument, and so every detail has to be examined through this lens. Therefore, the factoid model is very promising in presenting information as factoids rather than facts, and reminding us that oratory is not wholly reliable. However, there's an alternative perspective. And if my domain is solely the corpus of Attic oratory, which it is, perhaps an approach is taking the orators at their word. I'm not presenting an accurate portrait of classical Athens at the time, but rather classical Athens as portrayed by oratory. So this is all still a work in progress and meant more to be sort of the start to a discussion. It's something I'm putting a lot of thought into. So I would really appreciate feedback and your thoughts on what I'm dealing with. So thank you for your attention.